So thank you everyone for joining in today. I would like to begin by acknowledging the indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. I'm speaking from Edmonton, Alberta, and I and the University of Alberta respectfully acknowledge that we are situated on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands we each call home. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the ICOI session, which is titled Aging in Third Places, Creating Community Spaces and Building Social Infrastructure for Senior Immigrants with Dr. Zushi Zhuang. A quick introduction about myself. So my name is Sandeep Agrawal, and I have the privilege to host this session and introduce our presenter today. I'm a professor and director of the School of Urban and Regional Planning at the University of Alberta. And I'm also the chair of the Education and Training Committee, which has put this session together. And I'm also the chair of Economic Research Committee of ICOI. In regards to ICOI, the full form is Inclusive Communities for Older Immigrants. It is a partnership grant. It's led by Dr. Sapali Guruge at TMU, Toronto Metropolitan University, and is funded by SSHRC. The project is a 7-year project. It's a multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral, multi-provincial project. And the idea here is to build sustainable connections to generate knowledge about social isolation and connectedness among older immigrants. And again, the main objective is to improve older immigrants' lives in Canada. So this and upcoming training sessions are developed by the ICOI Education and Training Committee, as I mentioned before. The sessions usually are bi-weekly, but sometimes they are not. But to find more information about the sessions, you can visit the ICOI website. It's www.icoi.ca/news. So this session will be 30-minute presentation by our presenter and followed by Q&A. And again, this will give you the opportunity to ask questions to better inform about the topic. And I would encourage you to keep putting your questions, remarks, comments through Zoom chat throughout the presentation. And obviously you will have the chance to ask questions orally at the end of the presentation. And I would just ask you to mute your microphone. You can keep your video on depending upon what you're doing. So at this time, I would like to introduce our presenter, Dr. Zushi Zhuang. Her bio was attached to the description, so I'm not going to go through the entire bio, and many of you may already know her quite well. But Dr. Zushi Zhuang is Associate Professor in the School of Urban and Regional Planning at Toronto Metropolitan University. Her research explores the growing urban diversity and how city builders can instill the values of equity and inclusion into planning policies and practices. Just on a personal note, I admire Zushi's work. I've seen her work very closely at TMU when I was a colleague of her. And in fact, we were together on a panel just a few days ago in Toronto. So welcome, Zushi, and thank you for leading this session. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Seth. Thank you so much, Sandeep, and also thanks to the team for the invitation. Welcome everybody for joining today's session. I really look forward to the discussions after the presentation. Let me first share my screen. Will you be able to see it, the full screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yes. I'm also like, in addition to my bio, I'm also a registered professional planner. And while I'm talking about aging in third places today, I must say, I'm not an expert on aging, but broadly speaking, I've been conducting research on immigrants' lived experiences and how intersectionality plays a role in their settlement and integration process. Specifically, my focus areas is basically, it's like my research areas focus on intersections between space, place, and people. And under this central focus, I developed my work under 5 sub-areas. The first one is on migration and cities, and the other part is around ethnic immigrant entrepreneurship, and also looked at suburban neighborhood, especially the suburban immigrant neighborhoods, as well as the implications of diversity and inclusion when it comes to community engagement, and when it comes to the engagement of equity serving. I also looked at public spaces and the ethnic placemaking efforts in the urban and suburban and smaller city contexts. So I have my research lab, Diversity Lab, and if you are interested in learning more about my work there, you can check the website over there. But talking today, I will talk about third places, and specifically around the theme of aging in third places. I've been conducting research on how third places play a role in shaping immigrant settlement and integration experiences, and vice versa. This notion of third place was conceptualized by Oldenburg as places conducive for social interaction and well-being outside of the first place, such as home, and the second place, such as work. These are places where people gather primarily to enjoy each other's company, and are described as the embodiment of 8 characteristics, such as a neutral ground where individuals can come and go organically and informally, a leveler that allows people from any status to come together equally. Activity is conversation. It's accessible in time and location, normally dominated by a regular crowd, and it's low profile with unimpressive looking. Generally speaking, it comes with a playful mood and a sense of home. As conceptualized by Oldenburg, third places provide inclusive spaces for everyday interactions and the enrichment of social life in communities. Building upon this theory, Rudberg et al., they also develop a typology, including free and publicly available spaces, such as libraries and community centers, social service organizations and agencies, low-cost commercial spaces, such as malls and shopping malls or restaurants or cafes, creative athletic or entertainment venues, such as arts venues, personal services, such as barbershop, and in the literature, third places support the development of social infrastructure, a term that refers to physical spaces, services, institutions, or programs. So social infrastructure can be understood as a physical conduit to bring people together and support social services. Investment in social infrastructure is an imperative to mitigate forms of social and urban inequalities. And in my previous work, I looked at how ethnic retelling in the Greater Toronto area, especially in the suburb, how they actually play a role to form community spaces, as well as provide the needed infrastructure to support immigrant settlement and integration, funded by SSHRC. And I also make a documentary called Globurbia to capture those lived experiences in the suburbs, and also how the third places play a role in shaping those experiences. And I'm currently working on another project. It's called Place Matters, specifically looking at building welcoming communities in small and medium-sized Canadian cities, funded by SSHRC, specifically also looking at the role of third places in those smaller cities, and specifically how they shape newcomers' lived experiences. The findings reveal that third places play an important role in shaping their experiences and have an impact on immigrants and newcomers' well-being when considering the opportunity for social interaction, accessibility to cultural amenities, such as food and retail, public services, and nature, and also negative experiences of racism and discrimination in public spaces, such as streets, hiking trails, transit, and shops, were also reported by racialized newcomers. So after joining the ICOI project, a group of academic co-applicants, collaborators formed a geospatial committee, in addition to the social, economic, and political research committees, and I serve as the lead of this new research stream. The focus of the geospatial committee is to understand the role of space and place in affecting older immigrants' social isolation and connectedness, since their social, economic, and political inclusion processes are fundamentally embedded in space and place. We seek to understand the implications of the spatial and physical environment from the individual, household, neighborhood, community, and transnational scales towards its impacts on older immigrants. Thanks to the research assistant, Ryan Logg, who was hired to conduct a literature review of the geospatial factors contributing to social isolation and connectedness of older immigrants. We scanned individual articles that were shared on the ICOI literature review folder. We scanned from the scan each articles individually from the quantitative and qualitative folders, and also cross-check the synthesized themes which emerged from the French literature. And also we searched and selected some of the readings from several reference lists from scholars to look at the geospatial relevance. Additional articles from the Ontario team scoping the review were also included. The abstract was reviewed during this process for relevance to the geospatial research stream by selection based on topics and or keywords related to geography, environment, community, space, place, location, proximity, and neighborhood. In total, we identified 63 relevant articles and identified the list of geospatial factors. So at the micro individual level, the factors like proximity to people who can provide social linguistic mobility support or living arrangement, familiarity to the social built environment or the sense of belonging, those factors can affect immigrants' feelings of social isolation or connectedness. At the meso community level, access to and use of public services, neighborhood attributes, ethnic concentration, or the so-called ethnic enclave, the availability and access to community spaces. Those are the determining geospatial factors at the meso level, which is the key factors that I will emphasize a bit more when it comes to third places. So I'm going to use a case study approach, combining the previous research in the field, as well as some of the ethnographic observations, and to bring 4 case studies to the discussion. The first one is about Scarborough. It's about the suburban Chinese shopping malls where daily senior group activities take place to promote healthy living. Scarborough has long been serving as a landing pad for generations of immigrants to the GTA. They accounted for immigrant population accounted for 57% of the total population versus 51% of the city average. The influx of immigrants to the area has brought new forms of retail developments, notably the Chinese indoor shopping malls. The Agincourt neighborhood in Scarborough is the heart of Chinese retail developments in the GTA. The first Chinese indoor mall, the Jagan Center, that was the first Chinese indoor mall in North America, was opened in 1984. Since then, approximately 20 Chinese indoor malls have been developed, transforming the conventionally homogeneous suburban landscapes and catering to the growing needs of the Chinese and other Asian populations in the Agincourt area. Suburban indoor shopping malls are not new and have been considered as informal public spaces or the new main street. However, the Chinese indoor malls, they are designed and developed in different ways than the mainstream malls. Typically, they feature small independent Asian-oriented businesses anchoring restaurants or grocery stores rather than department stores. And many of them provide a mix of retail, food-oriented businesses, and personal and professional services. So these indoor shopping spaces provide not only a large variety of options for cultural goods and foods and services, but also the needed social spaces for senior immigrants to interact and bond with each other and to promote healthy living. It's not, as you can see from the pictures, it's not uncommon to observe regular senior group exercise taking place inside Chinese malls, such as fan dancing, Tai Chi, light dancing. Many seniors were regulars to these malls and tend to arrive early in the morning and may enjoy breakfast or coffee and tea in the food court while reading Chinese newspaper or watching TV news from Hong Kong or mainland China. Or you can see in the picture, the Chinese male seniors, they tend to play Chinese chess in the food court and often attracting spectators who are strangers, but eager to offer winning tips to the players. I interviewed the founder of the Hongkei Fitness and Dance Club, who founded the club in 1997 with over 1,000 members and with operations in 11 locations across the GTA. And actually, I captured the interview in my documentary, The Growburbia. The founder immigrated from Hong Kong with her family, but had to stay home at the beginning because her husband and children, they were all working during the day and she did not speak English and felt distressed during her early arrival. And it was a turning point for her when she started dancing with other Chinese seniors in a park and then triggered her idea to initiate this fitness club for senior immigrants. Many of those immigrants cannot speak English, but Cantonese or Mandarin. So organizing this group exercise in the shopping malls, in the Chinese shopping malls, helps remove language barriers and make the seniors feel comfortable and welcomed and bring them with physical, personal, and societal benefits. Like the quote from her that mentioned the benefit of doing group exercise is that we are not only becoming healthier, but are also changing our mindsets. We no longer see things negatively and we tend to help out each other. It's very free for our children. And they don't need to worry at all because they know we have friends to take care of each other. Some senior immigrants had health problems when they first arrived in Canada, but after doing regular exercise with us, the symptoms were gone. And I said to them, it's that you help save the government's health spending. It's a charitable deed. And joining the club makes us a family and we help each other like family members. So the other case study is in Brampton. Brampton is an outer suburb of Toronto, which has experienced rapid demographic growth in the past few decades, representing rich multicultural diversity. Immigrants and visible minorities represented 52% and 73% of the population, respectively, with South Asians accounting for 44%, Blacks 14%, and Filipino 3.4%. They are ranked as the top 3 minority groups. Under this context, suburban developments have juxtaposed with the growing demographics and diversity as amplified along the Gore Road corridor at the city's periphery. So this is the example of a 1 kilometer stretch along the Gore Road corridor. And it actually has become a 15-minute community fully developed in the last 30 years. If you can look at these pictures along that 1 km stretch, there are places of worship, including 3 Hindu temples, 1 Islamic service center, and 1 Gurdwara, which means the Sikh temple. And cultural institutions, including 2 banquet halls for weddings and cultural events, 1 Sikh private school, and retailing and services featuring over 400 South Asian and Caribbean businesses. So these are popular third places for immigrants to shop, work, learn, play, and pray. The proximity to the surrounding residential areas and the mixed uses along this corridor have provided local residents, especially seniors, with convenient access to ethnic food, retailing, and services, promoting active transportation on foot or on bike. Several South Asian and Caribbean seniors who took part in the Shopper Intercept surveys commented on the convenience to access everything from home. They normally walk or bike to the plazas for purposes for shopping, meeting friends, and practicing multiple daily prayers, or participating in senior programs offered by their religious institutes, such as yoga, cooking, or ESL classes, games and sports, or even sightseeing trips. A heritage schoolhouse along this corridor was transformed into a shared community center, catering to the needs of various age and cultural groups. Despite the small size of the building, with only 50 people at capacity, a group of about 30 to 40 Punjabi senior men have been using the space on a daily basis for social gathering. Most of them walked or cycled to the place or traveled in a wheelchair. They cooked meals together by using the center's kitchen facility and often played card games or simply sat together chatting about everything from politics to their families. They have brought into Canada the tradition of Asaf, meaning togetherness or support, a social gathering that normally happens in a village square, under a big tree, or in a park back home. The community center has provided an important space for these Punjabi seniors to build social connectedness through traditional cultural practices. Recognizing the spatial and cultural needs of the community, the city of Brampton actually has waived the venue rental fees for this group of seniors to ensure they have free access to the space and the facility. The center is also being shared by other groups for different programs and services at different times throughout the week, such as senior yoga, children's arts and crafts, and Sunday services for the church group. In these case studies, under a suburban context, accessibility is the key to ensuring the activation of third places and effective uses of social infrastructure. The next case study is in the inner city of Toronto, is the Parkdale area, featuring high-rise apartment buildings and very busy main street with streetcars operating and mixed residential, commercial, institutional uses that offer a variety of urban amenities and neighborhood services. Because of the large stock of rental apartment housing in the area and convenient access to urban amenities, Parkdale has long been an entry point for immigrants who are accounted for over 43% of the population. What makes Parkdale distinct from other urban neighborhoods in Toronto is its high concentration of Tibetan refugees who have transformed the area into an unofficial Little Tibet. Many senior Tibetan refugees came from settlements in rural India or Nepal, where they used to do farming jobs. They did not speak English, and many took the adult ESL classes provided by the Parkdale Public Library. When the librarian who taught the class found out vegetables have become unaffordable to these seniors, she took the initiative to acquire a vacant private property adjacent to the library and turn it into the Milky Way community garden together with the Tibetan seniors. During the walking tour with these seniors, they share how important land and nature means to them in their daily life, and they express the joy and pride of growing their own food and growing their own food and also practice their farming and gardening skills and developing urban agriculture in the community. They associated the garden with home and felt satisfied with the connection to their cultural roots. In another walking tour organized by a Tibetan legal worker who was raised in the area and has been serving the Tibetan community for many years, she shared that the community garden has become a thriving communal space that makes the seniors feel comfortable, included, and engaged. The garden was later acquired by the Community Land Trust to become a community-owned property, which will continue connecting with newcomers and seniors through healthy food, learning, and skills development opportunities. The last case study I'd like to share is the Thorncliffe Park, also in the inner city of Toronto. Just to give you a bit of background, in the city of Toronto, approximately 500,000 people, or 20% of the population, live in a unique stock of over 1,000 high-rise apartment buildings constructed during the post-war era. Despite the poor building conditions and the lack of services and amenities, these apartment tower neighborhoods have become the landing places for newcomers over decades. Thorncliffe Park is one of these tower neighborhoods located in the inner city of Toronto, home to over 20,000 residents with over 63% of immigrants and nearly 80% visible minorities. It is one of the 31 neighborhood improvement areas designated by the city that aim to strengthen the social, economic, and physical conditions by investing in people, services, programs, and facilities for the local community. However, with very limited public spaces in the neighborhood, many newcomers, seniors, and women, they found it very challenging to access to information, resources, and services. Considering the large South Asian population in the area and the cultural and economic needs of women and seniors have been prioritized, the Thorncliffe Park Women's Committee was founded in 2008 with many senior members and has led a series of initiatives to improve public space, create local economic development opportunities, and empower immigrant women, seniors, and youth to champion communities building. Because according to the interview with the local community leader, she said they need more than just a green space. So what they did was the committee formulated an idea for a community market located in the revitalized Central Park for local residents to sell their clothing, jewelry, and other cultural items from home countries that are generally not available from retailers. The market helped immigrant women and seniors connect to their community and also gain supplemental income for their families. It's also a means for intercultural knowledge exchange. In addition, they built an outdoor tandoori oven for cooking events in the park, which is very unique for the South Asian community and represents their culture and heritage. They also converted a shipping container into a year-round cafe in the center of the park to address the challenges of seasonality, to promote prolonged animation of the public space, and provide employment catering and food handling training opportunities for local women, senior, and youth members. So this success of the initiatives was due to their comprehensive understanding of community needs, especially those of immigrant youth, women, and seniors, because they know the immigrant women and seniors, they saw their children and family as their first priority and themselves the last, but their needs for social space and employment or entrepreneurship opportunities are often unmet. Many women and seniors, they ran home-based or informal businesses inside apartment buildings, such as beauty spa, hair salon, childcare, catering, family kitchen, school pickup and drop off, etc. But they still have, especially for residents, they have limited resources and lack matching skills. The agencies, they only provide traditional settlement services for them, but not so much on entrepreneurship opportunities. The committee, the Women's Committee, considered these different interests. And they want, especially for immigrant women and senior, they want income, but they are also fearful of losing social benefits and are not looking for specific full-time jobs. They want, but they all still want to balance family life and have some flexible entrepreneurial income or employment opportunities. So that's why the market and the cafe held in the neighborhood park has created such opportunities beyond economic benefits. What does that really mean for us to continue the work with older immigrants, and especially talking about aging in third places? They do present it, the 4 case studies have presented various degrees of ethnic concentrations in both urban and suburban contexts, which are conducive to the activation of third places, such as parks and markets and gardens and shopping malls, places of worship, community centers, etc., etc. They support the establishment of ethnic-oriented social infrastructure and manifested through ethnic places like shops, gardens, places of worship, market, or traditional practices such as food, south, the gathering, tai chi, or the tandoori oven, and helping to enhance a sense of familiarity for senior immigrants to form connections and experience acculturation in a new and often unfamiliar environment. The findings also address the importance of accessibility and spatial proximity to both physical and social infrastructure in the context of ethnic concentration. However, this has been quite challenging in the suburban context because traditionally they are designed and developed with segregated land uses and automobile-oriented built environment. But the case study, such as the one in Brampton, is actually demonstrates the agency of immigrant communities, how they create their own third places and build their social infrastructure to support and more walkable, age-friendly, and inclusive places to provide senior immigrants with the needed public spaces, amenities, and services that are often underdeveloped in conventional suburbs. And also want to talk about the developing a sense of belonging to the local community. What constitutes a community for senior immigrants to feel belong can be subjective. The case studies highlighted here it basically address the importance of third places in supporting the social construction of a community and the localized belonging attached to this community. For example, the sense of belonging or sense of community was developed through organized group activities in the shopping malls, social gathering in the form of staff, religious practices and programming in temples and mosques, and growing vegetables in the community garden and building an outdoor tandoori oven and community market in the public park. They are also, this sense of belonging is also developed through engagement in civic activities taking place in third places in the community. And participation in community activities and events is associated with senior immigrants' well-being and the mitigation of isolation. These case studies have illustrated how senior immigrants took bottom-up and community-based initiatives to convert a vacant land into a community garden, revitalize a rundown public park into a thriving community space, and organize group exercises to promote healthy living, and utilize community amenities to shop, learn, pray, and socialize. These senior groups demonstrated their civic engagement and advocacy efforts through their negotiation with city authorities in the pursuit of better community spaces and support infrastructure, which are essential for developing a sense of connection and well-being for older immigrants within the local community they have settled in. Some implications for municipalities. It really highlights the role of ethnic-oriented third places as a form of social infrastructure that provides accessible, familiar, engaging, and interactive community spaces for social, economic, and civic participation for senior immigrants. These spaces serve beyond the function of providing social interactions to enhance connectedness. They also provide a space for empowerment, engagement of senior immigrants in civic affairs and community advocacy. However, they are more based on grassroots initiatives or community-based initiatives. There's a lack of municipal involvement or policy intervention that would address the facilitation, maintenance, and support for these ethnic-oriented and age-friendly third places, in part due to the insufficient understanding and acknowledgement of the imperative needs of senior immigrants. Despite the ad hoc municipal involvement, such as supporting the revitalization of public spaces in the Thorncliffe Park or waiving fees for the Punjabi senior man in the use of Brampton's community center, immigrant communities had to proactively lobby to the authorities to negotiate their spaces or develop partnerships with community organizations and the private sector in order to have their needs met. So for municipalities, we do need to think about how to be more proactive, to form, for example, community partnerships, acknowledge and prioritize the needs of older immigrants, and develop explicit policies that address aging in third places. And asset mapping of the existing physical and social infrastructure could be the first step to better understand local needs and challenges and opportunities facing older immigrants. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I welcome your questions and comments.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful presentation, Zushi. I was very interested in the Thorncliffe Park because I lived there when I moved back to Canada from the US. So that's an interesting one. And again, just a reminder to everyone, feel free to put your questions in the chat box or just use the button at the bottom to indicate to me that you wish to ask a question, Zushi. Just to start off, Zushi, and there's a question in the chat box and I'll get to it in a second. Third places, I'm just trying to understand the idea here. Most of the places that you mentioned, almost all of them, are physical spaces. What about virtual spaces? How does it change the understanding of third places? Places you mentioned are either public or commercial. Well, what about people's basements? What about a room in a condo building? So I just want you to, yeah, just expound a little bit more on third space idea.
Absolutely, absolutely, because the virtual space will be super interesting because, like, say, people using the social media apps that is familiar, like that, they feel more familiar with the cultural backgrounds. Like the Chinese seniors, they will prefer to use WeChat instead of LinkedIn or sorry, instead of Twitter or WhatsApp or Facebook, because those apps, they are banned in China. So WeChat is basically one app embedded all these social media functions. So using that app, using the technology or the virtual space, it creates that transnational ties and provide to build their own community or the connectedness with their families and friends back home. But that was not really like in my previous research. It was not within that scope of my research. But also the other thing you mentioned, the informal spaces, that has been discussed a lot in the literature as well as in some of my interviews. For example, the secondary suite in Brampton, which is not considered legal, but people share those spaces, the basement unit, using it as like a gathering space, or in the literature, like in the Jane Finch area in Toronto, they also use some basement spaces for community gathering, or the kind of like the abandoned church space for their social events or some kind of things. So that is super interesting. Like we talk about, I mentioned in Songkip Park, they actually operated some of the informal businesses, right? Like a beauty spa or a salon and or a childcare, although they don't really have that the legal status, but it's informal economy, informal ethnic economy happening in those places. And even just in the apartment buildings, they use the hallway, right, as a social space. So it's fascinating, like how immigrants, they reshape the space and further expand the so-called third places. And so that's why the implication for us, especially for municipalities or planners or officials, be really mindful of these unique needs. And when we talk about revitalization, redevelopment, we easily could.
Okay, Zushi, there are questions. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
So I think, so I think you may want to sort of expand the theoretical understanding of third spaces, even though all of it may not be covered within your case study. That's I think the takeaway for me. I want to get to these questions. I'm sorry to just just a question here in the chat box is, how diverse are the women group who are involved or run the apartment? I think this is a question about the Thorncliffe Park you mentioned. So how diverse are the women group who are involved or run the apartment building business? Is the program inclusive or based on ethnicity? Or is it like a lounging environment?
It's mainly, I would say, because there's a high concentration of South Asian immigrants in Thorncliffe Park. So if you talk about South Asian, that's also a term, an umbrella term that implies very diverse regional differences or religious differences, linguistic differences that has like a high degree of diversity. But if you look at it, just using it as one umbrella term, it's majority of the members, they are South Asian women, but they do share like different forms of diversity within the group. Is the program inclusive or based on ethnicity? During my interviews, I do feel like they are open to all the volunteers. They make the door open and try to be as inclusive as possible. When they created, like when they initiated those early days, when they initiated the market, initially there were only 5 volunteers on the committee. But once they started, and it quickly grew to 100 people. People just showed up and they just come, they just join, they just help. So I would say the program's pretty inclusive, although like you can say it's its own, even though it's called Women's Committee, but according to the interviews, and there were male helpers and volunteers, and why not? And also youth to help out, and then also like supporting those initiatives, because they're not just doing the community park. They are doing the year-round cafe, they're running those programs, and also they do some youth engagement activities to promote intergenerational communication.
Okay, excellent. So I see, John, your hand is up. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, first of all, great presentation, really interesting. Maybe mine's more of a comment, but let's see what the thoughts are. Now, I guess what I'd do is link it to just the idea of civil society. You know, we think about nonprofit organizations as the organizational face of civil society, and these third spaces as the place that civil society activities sort of take place. And so obviously they're really kind of critical. And you think about something like COVID, right, where a lot of those spaces come to be shut down. And also just the threat through, you know, to some degree, you know, commercialization opens up spaces, but also closes down spaces. So I think, you know, it really draws attention to the importance of those spaces, and especially connected to the idea of civil society. And, you know, I think about something like libraries and so forth that are constantly threatened with closures. And I think those are one of the important spaces. So again, you know, I think it just, the presentation just really highlights, I think, this connection. So it was more of a comment than a question.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, John.
So there is a question, Zushi, in the chat box. The case studies describe the relations between third places and old Chinese immigrants. Any expected changes in the relations for the future younger generations? So I think question is, are these places designed to mix multiple generations?
Interesting question. I think in some of the cases, when we talk about like the Chinese malls, for example, it's kind of like only the seniors will show up. Not so many younger generation during the morning hours. But if you look at those shopping malls, you often find the high school students hanging out in the shopping malls because they can find, even though they are born here in Canada, but they can find those cultural goods and foods that they are familiar from their cultural or family roots. So that really create that space for intergenerational exchange. We often see the seniors sitting in the food court, but then the stage set up for Taekwondo or set up for martial arts for the kids. So you see the seniors watching them and having fun together. And some of those are grandparents. They are dropping off and picking up the grandchildren for extracurricular activities. Because in that mall, people don't just, unlike the mainstream malls, people go there to shop and go and come and go. But for the Chinese shopping malls or Asian themed malls, they are spaces for people to hang out, socialize, take extracurricular program for kids and senior programs and etc. So it's really a mix of activities there. So you can call them very intergenerational space. Some other examples, some other places like Thorncliffe Park, the Women's Committee, they have emphasized so much on youth engagement. When they initiated the market, the community market in the park, they already offered those volunteering positions or hiring summer students to support the market. And for the cafe, the year-round cafe converted by the shipping container, they also offer those training, food handling, and training opportunities for youth. And then they hire youth for the cafe to run the cafe as well. So those places, I think, like they also try to be inclusive, but not all the third places are inclusive. And sometimes it's inclusive to a certain group of people. Sometimes it's exclusive to the others.
Yeah, no, good answer. The other question I see here is it's connected with the first one. So I'll just read the last part, which is how does it affect youth attitudes? And I'm assuming you're going to say, well, you haven't looked at that part, but any observations, thoughts, Zushi, on the effect on youth attitude, second generation, third generation?
That's an interesting question, because I also do research with people from different ages, and like say when I interview in ethnic entrepreneurs, immigrant entrepreneurs, and some of them, they are the second gen. Their parents pass over their businesses to them, and they are taking care of the businesses. And they are really fascinating to hear those stories about this kind of like the cultural roots they are connected with, or even some shoppers. When we did shoppers intercept surveys in the malls and in the community centers, and when we did the visitor intercept surveys, and people came by just to say, yes, I used to come here a lot with my parents, and now I wanna find something here, and it's always there, the store where I used to buy my first pair of glasses, and because it's Asian fit, and you have to find those optical stores. So the attitude towards this kind of ethnic-oriented third places, I think in a way it's in strengthening that connection. But also sometimes people question about, are they inclusive or not, or exclusive, because it's only for people who are familiar with those cultures, but not really meant for people who don't practice the religions or not from this culture. And I had lots of those experiences in the field where you are the outsiders entering into that space.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There is a comment from John. When researching on immigrant youth and settlement programming, one of the things that came through strongly was the importance of youth-friendly spaces at the agencies where youth can gather and feel welcome from their connect to programs. The focus by government funders on programs rather than support of organizations themselves often make the creation of such spaces difficult. As he says, I think similar issues would hold for immigrant seniors. I just wanted to put that comment out. I see Bharti's hand is up. So Bharti, please go ahead.
Thank you. That was really interesting. I just wondered if you came across in your review that you did, because recently, I think it's 2021, the first paper was published, which was basically challenging to go beyond space and activity and really look at from the health perspective to really explore what is it in this people-place relationship, what are the social psychological processes that enable people to thrive, and what are the obstructions? So the authors were really talking about there's a lot of stuff done on activities, but we have to start looking, if we are really going to focus on aging well, what are the social psychological processes? And so social identity approach is one way that they are moving forward. I wonder if you came across it. And the reason I asked this is really building on your stuff of inclusiveness, is that you talked about, my work is a lot in the rural areas. So if we look at the case studies and we transport into rural regions where there's shrinking social capital, what happens then? then it's more about really what is happening. You know, there's bereavement and there's hardly any people around. So basically, really, there's a paper published called Just Getting Out of the House and Building Third Places in Public Transport. And so I just wondered about this social identity process and what is it like that whole thing of insideness that helps people from a health perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot that I may not be able to really give an answer, right? Because I'm still exploring that, like under different social and political contexts. And if you talk about big cities versus smaller cities, right? And especially my case studies here so focus on the GTA. That has the easy access to amenities and easy access to transit, even though you live in suburb of Brampton, it's still 30 minutes train ride to Toronto, right? So that really like triggered the question about what happens in like, what are these third places in smaller cities? In fact, that's one of my ongoing projects right now, that I looked at the smaller communities across Canada and using photo voice to capture the newcomers' life experiences in those smaller spaces, especially how they experience the nature, the built environment, but also how do they connect with the space and place and build that sense of belonging. It's really hard. There are lots of challenges because the lack of transit options, the lack of ethno-cultural amenities or food, and those are the barriers. And even though you can still have most likely in smaller cities, and you tend to have easier access to the nature. Nature could be another determining factor for people's health and well-being. But when you are exploring nature, and many of the immigrants, they are not comfortable with the weather here, the cold weather here, and that poses challenges to their integration, to their settlement experiences. So it's really, really fascinating to look at the differences in different places, and talking about third places or public spaces or community spaces in those smaller cities. It's really, really limited. They have limited resources, limited access, limited infrastructure, limited funding, and also the attitude, the anti-immigration attitude. It's also another threat to their integration. So I think you raised a really good question. Would you mind sharing with me those readings? I would love to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So in the interest of time, and I do see, Zushi, you've done something quite nice. There are tons of questions and comments in the chat box. So let me summarize the 3 questions. So one is about, the pandemic and the so-called third places were closed. So the question is, how do, let's say immigrant seniors have adapted to this change? The other is, have you researched about the sustainability of these third places in terms of hygiene and cleanliness? So yeah, let's just deal with these 2 questions. So first is about any adaptations by immigrant seniors, and second is about sustainability of the third places.
I see. So the first one is the reopen, right? Like those places. Interestingly, I might have different observations because one of my students just finished a master research paper focusing on the survival of small immigrant businesses and how they build community resilience during the COVID time. So the findings was they did develop their own strategies to combat these challenges, both the health crisis as well as the economic economic challenges, and how they survive during the pandemic. And they really rely on their ethno-cultural resources, and you rely on the resources from their own community to build the bonding, to develop business strategies, and adapting to the changes, the fast changes during the pandemic time. For example, just like You talk about, oh, lots of these closed, the stores closed, restaurant closed. But some of the restaurants, they came up with the idea like, okay, we are not doing what's it called, the dine-in experiences, but we do wholesale them. So they package all the food. They make this like a barbecue sauce with the barbecue sauce. So people actually have the group order, and they actually making more money than before. And so they need to be creative and adaptive to the new changes. And I found it that's talking about resilience of these small businesses. The findings were actually quite unexpected, because they find their own way to survive. And then I went back to some of the places I did research before, and I'm glad to see that it's not really like high vacancy rate as I expected. It seems like they are coming back, they're staying, they're surviving. So I think that is really like depending on how you look at the local context and which location or which places you are talking about. But the sustainability issue, it's quite important, because it does require some of the maintenance from the community or from the municipality, or some of the preservation. Like if you talk about Chinatown, a lot of those clan houses, they are kind of like being abandoned, or they are under the threat of redevelopment. But actually, they are actually those heritage may not be the Victorian buildings, or may not be has any architectural significance, but it means a lot to the community. So though that is the invisible or intangible heritage, how do we preserve it? And it's not just about the hygiene or cleanliness. Beyond that, it's how to preserve the heritage and the history and the culture of the community through those places.
Okay, good. Thanks, Sushi. There's one other question, and I think this is from Atta. And Atta, I suggest you connect with Sushi offline. And this is to do with cultural fusion and mixed cultural identities, whether I think goes back to what you were saying, Sushi, about inclusivity and exclusivity of
Exactly.
the spaces. I'll let you two connect.
Sure.
We are just about an hour, so I would thank you for giving your time, Zushi, for absolutely wonderful session. It certainly elicited a lot of comments, feedback, and question. And thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you to Nushin, who was the one connecting with everyone and getting everyone giving their schedule and dates and such. So thank you, Nushin and Kerith, for organizing all of this to make things happen. I just wanted to say that this presentation will be available on the ICOI website in the coming weeks, because we are recording it. So please look out also for the upcoming sessions and in November and December. And again, we invite you all, those who are here in the call, to present your work, whether you are an academic or a community partner. You're all welcome to present and have discussion with the ICOI team and beyond. So again, thank you very much. Take care, everyone, and see you in the next session.